Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots. Liquor Shills, Deathly Search, Pests, Vassals, Meat Sex. I'm a useful idiot, and part of my catch-up is talking about a small story that appeared last October. And on the surface, of course, it's just a blip, but I think the implications are important enough to talk about U.S. troops going to Cameroon. And of course, we know that U.S. troops have been involved in all these neighboring countries now, Chad, Niger, Nigeria, and now Cameroon, fighting Boko Haram. And so this story illustrates a lot of things about U.S. foreign policy and then once again the complexities of geopolitics. So let's get right into the story. So, like I said, the U.S. is sending 300 troops to Cameroon. And the mission is ostensibly to, quote, to conduct airborne intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance operations in the region, unquote. And the language there is broad enough that any combat operations can be included as far as calling something a reconnaissance operations. And it goes on to say, quote, the forces will stay in the country as long as needed, unquote. So it's open-ended. These forces will stay in Cameroon as long as, I guess, the government authorizes it. So that's kind of interesting, too. And this wording comes from a War Powers Notification Act that Obama sent to Congress with this presidential power where he can make these military operations happen and just inform Congress that they're happening. And then, of course, the language also includes, quote, at the invitation of the government of Cameroon, unquote, because they have to legitimize and legalize this operation. So anyway, we still have Boko Haram. Of course, we don't hear about Boko Haram anymore. The last thing we heard is their pledge to ISIS. So that's one of the first things this brings up that's interesting about the situation with Boko Haram and now in Cameroon as well, is the idea that, of course, Boko Haram has nothing to do with ISIS per se. And just like Al-Qaeda became a franchise, now ISIS is a franchise. So Boko Haram, as notorious as they were, they can up the ante, and become even more badass by associating with ISIS. And this somehow gives them more legitimacy too, as well. So they can now operate under the banner of a religious crusade in Nigeria, whereas before they were just thieving, murdering scum. So anyway, we have Boko Haram continues their attacks in Cameroon, Nigeria, Niger, and Chad. And in 2015 alone, they killed another 3,500. So even though it's off the radar, the carnage still continues. And incidentally, most of those girls that were abducted in 2014 were never found. And so it became a cause du jour for liberal bumper stickers for about 2 months. And now nobody gives a shit. But that's how that works. The media uses it for sensationalism, and the government uses incidents like that to further their agenda. And the people line up and put on their bumper stickers, and then, like magic, it just disappears. So anyway, but one of the other layers of what's going on in Cameroon that's interesting is that, once again, this geopolitical complexity. We have Russia has signed a defense agreement with Cameroon, and Germany and China provide military equipment to the Cameroon government. And Russia, the UK, France, and the United States are all involved in training the Cameroon army. So that's kind of interesting. And Nigeria also buys a lot of their weapons from Russia too. So once again, we have all these players in there. They can put aside their differences in order to conduct business, which is usually military training and selling people weapons, but they can't get it together in the field. And of course, one of the other things that makes Cameroon important and will continue to put Cameroon on the map for U.S. and other global power countries' interest in that region is it's oil rich. And just like in Nigeria, Niger, and Chad, only a certain amount has been exploited so far, and with modern technology, there's a lot more to be had. So for a lot of these countries, they look at Africa like a storage, like future storage for where oil could come from in the future. And so the big picture of Cameroon is that yet once again we have United States military presence in almost every country in Africa, and I've done videos about U.S. presence in Africa and the expansion of AFRICOM, U.S. military command to cover the continent of Africa, which is a relatively new development just over the Bush and Obama administration. It's really flowered under the Obama administration, and now, like I say, we have special forces and bases in countries all over Africa, and Cameroon is just now part of that string. And that brings up the fact too that this is how these incursions start. So right now we have 300 U.S. troops there, including an officer hierarchy, and they'll start massaging Cameroon to accept a permanent U.S. military presence. And so for the time being, Boko Haram will be the focal point, but for the most part, the U.S. is mostly interested just expanding their influence and putting their footprint and presence in every country. So now U.S. Special Forces will be working with the Cameroon military, and then let me remind you, they'll be in there working with the Russians, and they'll be in there working with the Brits and the French and the Germans and the Chinese. So everybody's in there helping out Cameroon. Isn't that great? Everybody in the world can really be helpful all together when they want to be. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.